Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined by my partner in crime, Weston Hodkowitz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to preview Sunday's Green Bay Packers home game against the Houston Texans. It will be a noon Central Time kickoff. But before we dive into the Texans, Wes, there is a major piece of news with regard to this Green Bay Packers team. Rookie kicker Braden Narveson is out. Veteran kicker Brandon McManus is in. Packers have gone basically a season and a third now with rookie kickers, and it hasn't worked out. And so now the move is to go to a veteran, a proven guy, and Brandon McManus was Brian Gutekunst's choice.
Brandon McManus is Brian Gutekunst's choice. Brian talked, I guess, during practice on Wednesday about the decision to sign McManus, and certainly a lot of things go into that decision. There were some off-the-field issues, allegations that they have worked through. McManus said at his new locker, on Wednesday that situation and the allegations around it, during his time in Jacksonville, has been resolved. In the Packers, both he and the Packers looking to move forward here. One thing Gutekunst did reiterate, though, the Packers did their due diligence. They leaned on the NFL in their investigation into the whole situation and ultimately felt like this is, with where this team is at, it was time to go back to the veteran route. And I've said this time and time again, it applies typically more to the quarterback position. But when a team struggles, and the quarterback play is not where you want it to be, if the quarterback's a veteran, it tends to be that's where they end up drafting somebody. If it's a draft pick or a recent young player, that's when typically they go the veteran route. It's one or the other. And Green Bay is swinging the pendulum back towards the veteran route in McManus, a guy that is an 11th-year veteran out of Temple. I thought this was a really salient point that you raised, and maybe you're going to get into it here in a second, but the fact of how efficient he's been within 50 yards. And as much as you want to have the big home run hitter, there's times where you have to get the gotta-have them kicks. And I think that's what the Packers, with where this team is at 4-2 and where they think they can get to this season, they feel like McManus can be that guy.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I dove into the statistics a little bit with McManus is because when the signing was originally announced, the news was leaking out Tuesday night initially. The Packers made it official on Wednesday. I saw a lot of people pointing to, well, Brandon McManus, his career percentage on field goals is 81.8%. That's roughly the same percentage that Anders Carlson had last year as a rookie for the Packers. And I was like, wait a minute. Brandon McManus kicked for 9 years in Denver. And I just remember from watching games and whatnot, the Broncos had him try a bunch of long kicks, 55, 56, 58-yarders. He was doing that all the time. So I dug into his statistics, and he's tried 85 50-plus yard field goals in his career. I believe it's 85, maybe it's 82. Anyway, it's a number in the 80s. He's made more than half of them. He's made roughly 55% of those. But if you take out the 55% on 50-plus, which isn't bad by any means, I think that's still a pretty good clip for those difficult kicks. If you take out the 55% on the 50-plus, inside 50 yards in his career, which is 10 years, 9 with Denver, 1 with Jacksonville, inside 50 yards, this guy's been 91% for his entire career. We have watched Braden Narveson miss 5 field goals, 6 if you count the one that was called back by the penalty in Tennessee, in 6 weeks. All of those misses were under 50 yards. We watched last year Anders Carlson miss 5 extra points from 33 yards away. Brandon McManus has missed 9 33-yard extra points in his entire career. Carlson missed 5 of those last season. The upgrade here is obvious. Now, there's never any guarantee things are going to work out. Hopefully for McManus, all of this off-the-field stuff, as he said, the NFL investigation, the civil lawsuit, it's been resolved. He's moving forward. He's looking at this as a fresh start, a new opportunity. He's very thankful for the Packers. The Packers are thankful that a guy with his track record was available to be able to make this change. Some people are wondering, okay, well, how come, there was so much patience with Anders Carlson last year, not so much patience this year with Braden Narveson? You have to remember last year, the Packers were 3-6 after 9 games. They were trying to figure it out. They didn't get above 500 until they got to 9-8, winning the last regular season game just to get into the playoffs. This is a 4-2 team that is in, right now, the toughest division in football, and the Packers have expectations this year that are way beyond what they had a year ago. There's no waiting around here. When this opportunity was available and the off-the-field stuff was looked at and the Packers were comfortable with it, this is a big-time move to make to get a proven veteran kicker who has been through it all, including kicking in a Super Bowl.
And keep in mind, too, Michael, as much as, Anders and people asking that question, he started the year making his first 15 kicks last season. He had built up that basis that the Packers were kind of leaning on to get through the rest of the year.
He had shown he could do it over the course of a number of weeks, and then it just started to unravel, and it never got put back together.
And if you flip it, if Anders starts that way, you wonder how much patience you're going to have then as far as how he finished the season.
Very good point.
So in terms of McManus, and one other thing, this was like you and me, Pippen and Jordan here. When you came up with all these statistics on McManus, I found it interesting diving into Mason Crosby's statistics because I'd never really thought about it that way as far as what is a guy's efficiency within 50 yards. Mason's was 86% within 50 and exactly the same, 55% beyond 50 as McManus. So 33 years old, he's not been kicking for a while. He had the 1 year with Jacksonville, was working out on his own down in Florida. We'll have to see how it all fits together. But for the Green Bay Packers at 4-2, with what it looks to be, there is not going to be much wiggle room within this NFC North division. This was one of the big glaring weaknesses on this team. And 31st ranked in field goal efficiency this season. The Jets only the team behind them right now, and a lot of that was because of what happened on Monday night with Greg Zuerlein. This is their feeling that, okay, we're going to get a guy, again, feeling comfortable with the human, feeling comfortable with the person. We're going to get a guy that has done this at a high level for a long time and is going to have already developed some of that scar tissue that unfortunately, Braden Narvison on the field is kind of working through right now, despite having a really solid leg.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is quite the challenge coming into Lambeau Field this weekend. The Houston Texans, they are 5-1. Their only loss to the undefeated Minnesota Vikings, a blowout loss as it turned out in Minneapolis. I believe the final score was 34-7. When you looking through the play-by-play of that game and looking at the highlights, it was just a game that started poorly for Houston, and they were never able to dig themselves out of a hole. It started with an interception, and the Vikings scored right away. Then they got another touchdown. It was 14-0 almost before all those Minnesota fans were in their seats. And so, but that is Houston's only loss this season. They bring in the reigning offensive rookie of the year from last year in quarterback C.J. Stroud, the reigning defensive rookie of the year from last year in Will Anderson. This is an immensely talented team, and head coach DeMeco Ryans, a former defensive rookie of the year himself for the Houston Texans. DeMeco Ryans is the head coach, along with this personnel. They've changed the fortunes of that franchise very, very quickly, and this is a team was a surprise entry in the playoffs last year, much like the Packers were, and a team with a lot of high hopes and expectations here, and off to a 5-1 start.
And when you talk about rebuilding a franchise and bringing them back up from just the absolute sediment of the National Football League to a contender in the quick turnaround that they've made, you can't say enough about the coaching staff. You can't say enough about these players. But ultimately, it comes back to hitting on the quarterback, and they did. They had C.J. Stroud fall in their lap at number 2, and he's been just everything and more you could have ever asked for in a young, developing quarterback. And certainly, the year right now, it all signs point towards this is going to be a player in this league for years to come.
No doubt.
And a guy that brings you a lot of versatility as well. I know we usually break this down with offensive and defensive, and I'm going to do that in a minute, but I wrote this in Insider Inbox, and I have to say this again because I really feel like Will Anderson doesn't get the proper credit because of Stroud being drafted at number 2. What a pragmatic decision for the Texans, making a sizable investment, got their quarterback, but then decided, you know what, we want to get our anchor of our defense for years to come. They invest 3 first-round picks and some other picks as well into this thing, and they get Will Anderson, who looks like as much of a game changer as it's been with Stroud on the offensive side of the ball, Anderson's providing that on the defensive side of the ball right now. And you look at pass rushers, you look at quarterbacks. You can bring up all the window dressing and all the other players that factor into that, but that's how you very quickly change the fortunes of an offensive and a defense. A guy that can handle your offense and can lead your team, and defensively, a guy that is going to be absolutely rip through the competition. Packers have a very significant challenge on their hands on Sunday.
Yeah, well, sticking with Anderson, he is the current AFC Defensive Player of the Week. He's coming off of a 3-sack game against the New England Patriots.
Thank you, Patriots offensive line.
Yeah. And we'll get to that too, because I think the Packers offensive line is coming off of maybe its best game of the season against the Arizona Cardinals. That's another thing that makes this matchup so intriguing. As far as the pass rush goes, the Texans have Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter, the former Minnesota Viking, on the other side. They do not have Mario Edwards. He has now been suspended. But all you have to do is, as far as what this defense is capable of, is look at the statistics from Houston's victory, a down-to-the-wire, walk-off long field goal victory over the Buffalo Bills from a couple weeks ago. Josh Allen, Buffalo quarterback, no slouch of a quarterback,
right.
Last I checked. He was 9 of 30 passing against that Houston defense. They made life really, really difficult for Josh Allen in that game. And this Minnesota Vikings certainly have a good defense. They've been doing some pretty impressive things. I think this Houston defense is probably the best one the Packers will have faced so far this year.
Josh Myers basically said the same exact thing at his locker on Wednesday, especially their defensive front. No disrespect to the secondary, but as far as what Myers is going to be looking at, what this Packers offensive line is going to be looking at. And while they do lose Mario Edwards, they're getting back Danico Autry, who is coming off a career year last year with Tennessee. The suspension, he's missed these first 5-6 games. But this is a guy the Packers are well familiar with. They almost signed him as an undrafted free agent when he came out of college back in 2014 or whatever it was. I believe it was a medical issue that kind of negated that. But the dude has been a consistent guy. Reminds me a lot of like Lawrence Guy in terms of it took some time for him to develop. But I mean, coming off career high in sacks last year, what he brings to that rotation, it's a lot of things to worry themselves with. And at the end of the day, the Packers have to find a way forward. And another thing that's going to help them is the fact that this game is taking place at Lambeau Field. It sounds like it's going to be a nice day at Lambeau. We're not going to have to probably have the benefit of some fall conditions like you did last week.
Yeah, it could. It sounds like it could hit 70 degrees in mid-October in Green Bay, which is rather unusual.
Rather unusual, but the fact is if this thing's at NRG, that I think Houston, it just allows them to play even more up tempo, especially that defense with how they get off the ball is going to be a real challenge. The other aspect I have to mention too, and I know we've kind of blurred the lines here between offense and defense. Nico Collins is not available either with the hamstring injury.
That was the next topic I was going to bring
My
up.
goodness, the start that he was off to. Now they still have Stephon Diggs, they still have Tank, they still have all these guys. Joe Mixon is back. There's a lot of weapons still in that offense. But Nico Collins has been a game changer for them. I think he was already up over 500 receiving yards on this season. I mean, just off to just a torrid pace start to this year. And the hamstring injury keeping him out now landed him, I think, on injured reserve.
I think as far as individual players, I think Nico Collins has the most explosive pass receptions.
17. Yeah. I knew that.
Okay. I mean, and that's now with missing a game last week and having exited the previous game early because of that hamstring. But you said it, Stephon Diggs, Tank Dell, they've still got some receivers that are legitimate weapons. I think a big key to this game, just because of how Houston's offense looked last week when Joe Mixon returned to the backfield.
Yeah.
Mixon missed a few games due to injury, including the Vikings game, which was the one game that the Texans did lose. But boy, he came back, and this guy is a powerful running back, and he really provides. He provides the balance in the offense for C.J. Stroud, much in the same way that the Packers have been looking and working toward the balance with Josh Jacobs, a power back, and a guy like Emmanuel Wilson behind him to balance things out for Jordan Love. Joe Mixon does that for C.J. Stroud, and the Packers are going to have their hands full with this running back.
Yeah, they really are. Mixon, I was intimating this in the inbox. I mean, they are a different offense. When you look at Now, again, they play different caliber competition. I'm not trying to put the Colts and the Patriots on the same pedestal as the other three opponents they've had, but you look at the points, you look at the production across the board, it's been better when Nixon has been out there. Their only loss came the first game they were without him, and they had to kind of find another way and grind out some victories there to keep things moving in the right direction. That was been a bit, as much as we talk about Josh Jacobs here or Aaron Jones in Minnesota, them bringing in Joe Mixon has really kind of filled one of those very few holes on their offense, and gives them a capable every down bell cow back to kind of work off of. The other one thing too, and maybe I can get into this too with the keys to victory, that stands out to me when you look at their defense, top 5 defense in a lot of different categories. They only have 5 interceptions. So Xavier McKinney has as many interceptions as the Houston Texans. Houston Texans have 30 passes defense this year. Packers have 26, I think, with their 9. I mean,
interceptions count as passes defense. So with the Packers with 26, that's including the team total of interceptions in that.
Yeah, so it's like they bat down balls, they get after it, they're aggressive, and that whatever, I don't even know, the tree's gone so far now, I can't even tell you these branches in terms of, what D'Amico's doing compared to what Robert Saleh did, compared to what, Vic Fangio did.
Right.
But this tree that sort of sprouted from San Francisco and has taken the league by storm, everybody's had their own little wrinkles to it. And the Houston Texans, again, that was the hallmark. Even before C.J. Stroud became the offensive rookie of the year, the way that defense turned things around last year, it's a formidable task the Packers are going to be poised to try to take down.
Yeah, well, we've touched on a few things already as far as the keys to victory. Is there something for you that rises to the top of the list in order for the Packers to leave Lambeau Field on Sunday with a 5-2 record?
So Nico Collins excusing himself from this game is one thing that is going to help. I mean, 567 receiving yards in 4 games or whatever cannot be wrong.
Yeah.
Again, Stephon Diggs is a guy the Packers are well familiar with. I'm not going to disrespect anything that C.J. Stroud is doing. I'm not going to disrespect anything that passing game is doing. Green Bay has to stop the run.
Yeah.
When you look at how this defense has turned things around, yes, it's very attractive. It's very awesome how many interceptions they have, and the takeaway numbers 17, 4 more takeaways than any other team right now in the NFL, what have you. But the fact is that Green Bay has also been much better against the run. With the exception of really one leaking out last week against the Cardinals, they've really contained the explosives there in this little turnaround that they've had since Jordan Love got back under center. If you can contain Joe Mixon, I think that sets you up to better defend what Houston is going to throw at you schematically down the field. It's not easy. Mixon is the guy that will grind you out. He's that Saquon Barkley type, okay, we'll see what the first half looks like, and then suddenly it's 120 rushing yards in the fourth quarter, and you don't know what happened.
Right.
But that is the basis for everything and how it starts. Also, they traded Cam Akers, too, now, so I guess Dameon Pierce would probably be the next guy up.
Yeah. Cam Akers, the Minnesota Vikings traded for him again.
Yeah, I think Akers now on his 4th tour with the Vikings.
Yeah, like Minnesota. He's back in Minnesota. An answer the Vikings have to some concerns about Aaron Jones' injury and whatnot, trying to build up some more depth there.
But Dameon Pierce being back is a big deal. That's another aspect of this thing that could really affect this game.
Yeah, and I'm 100% with you on stopping the run in this game, because nothing will be harder about stopping C.J. Stroud than if Joe Mixon gets going and that running game for the Texans is controlling the line of scrimmage. It's just going to make your life miserable defensively, and that is a big challenge. The other one for me that jumps out is really about offensively for the Packers is to keep doing what they're doing and really build on what we saw last week. Now, Houston's defense is much, much better than Arizona's, so this is a totally different ball game in that regard. But I'm talking about the balance that the Packers had between the passing game and the running game, and all of the variety that is part of the running game, whether it's the running backs, the wide receivers on the end arounds, stretching the defense laterally. And in line with that is also the offensive line, which I thought played its best game of the season collectively against the Arizona Cardinals. The offensive line rising to the challenge of a Houston defensive front that is probably as good as it gets in the league right now. Jordan Morgan got back into action from his shoulder injury. That rotation with Sean Ryan at right guard seems to be working. The Packers are getting production there. It looks like Josh Myers at center no worse for wear from, coming out of the last game with an injury, but then going back in. He seems to be okay. He is practicing. We've seen Rasheed Walker at left tackle. The penalties have settled down. He's really played some good football the last couple weeks and looking a lot more like the Rasheed Walker from the stretch run last year when he really took over that left tackle position and they ditched the rotation with Yash Nyman and said, okay, Rasheed, like, that's your job. That's the guy we're seeing now at left tackle. We all know what Elton Jenkins is at left guard. And Zach Tom, as we talked about before, you would never know that this guy missed almost basically the bulk of the offseason program and was very limited throughout training camp before the regular season started. Zach Tom is playing like a Pro Bowl level right tackle here, very quietly, not getting a lot of attention for it, and he doesn't draw attention to himself and all that kind of stuff. This Packers offensive line is coming together. We're seeing it come together faster earlier in the season than we did last year with some of the injuries and shuffling around and everything like that. Last week needs to be just a building block, though, for that group with what you've got coming in this week. I think this game falls a lot on those guys up front for the Packers.
I agree, and this will be a huge challenge for the guys on the edge. I mean, those are two big dudes, two talented, explosive pass rushers they're going to have to slow down. Even though Danielle Hunter only has 2.5 sacks, he does have 7 quarterback hits already this year. I mean, this is a big piece and a big puzzle for this offensive line to figure out. What you have to feel good about, though, is when you look at someone like Zach Tom, who, again, another 4th-round pick, day 3 guy, that has come in from, everyone does it different. Rasheed Walker did it very different. But it came in day 1 and looked like he belonged. So much reminding you of Elton Jenkins. But then Green Bay really had to just sit there and figure out, okay, so where do we want this guy to play? Because to this day, I still think no matter what position he's at, the guy can perform at a Pro Bowl level. He can perform at an all-pro level.
Yeah.
And he's so freaking consistent at a position which is very difficult to be consistent at, especially when you miss half your offseason program as an offensive lineman with a pec injury.
Yeah, a surgically repaired pectoral muscle.
Yeah, and so for him to be doing what he's doing, again, this is going to be a supreme test. This is going to be something where they're going to have to play 4 quarters and carry it out beginning, middle, and end. But for what Green Bay was able to find in that 2023 NFL draft, 2022 NFL draft, the fact that they have 2, I guess you'd call it 2.5 starters, with Sean Ryan in that rotation.
Yeah.
It's impressive what Green Bay's been managing to do with it basically all coming on day 3.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of sponsor business here, Wes. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. Quick look around Week 7 in the NFL, the one that everybody at home will sort of have half an eye on while watching the Packers and the Texans. The Detroit Lions at Minnesota against the Vikings. Detroit is 4-1. The Vikings are 5-0. We're being asked in Insider Inbox, as Packers fans, who are you supposed to root for here? My initial answer was, well, one of them's got to lose, which is a good thing because they're both ahead of you in the standings. They both can't win this week. Right. So that's but you got any kind of a gut feeling if you're a Packers fan on just whom you're supposed to root for here?
Okay, so first and foremost, I could not possibly care less. That was what I hate answering that way when people ask me those questions in inbox because then I feel like I'm being flippant, but I really don't care. What I will say, though, the more I marinated, the more I thought about it, the more I sat there and I was like, I looked into my crystal ball and said, what should happen in this matchup? I think I want the Detroit Lions to win.
Okay.
I think it's time for the Minnesota Vikings, for as many adverse wins as they got, as much rallying as they've done. You need that first arrow to hit in the siege, right? And it's just they're 5-0, they're feeling themselves. If the Detroit Lions could go into US Bank Stadium and do what they did to the Dallas Cowboys, suddenly you start to get some questions in your mind. I'm not saying you got to beat them 47-9.
Yeah.
But then everybody knew the Detroit Lions were going to be a very talented juggernaut this year, coming off of what they did last season. Nobody expected this out of Minnesota. My question is, let's say there is a loss there, then how does Minnesota bounce back from it?
Yeah.
Now, the contrast is the Packers have to play the Lions in 2 weeks anyway. Do you want them having so much momentum? I don't know. But I do think there is something to be said for potentially the Lions taking that 0.
I did see one suggestion. I think I'm actually going to print it in Friday morning's Insider Inbox column from a reader, and I think it's a good way to look at it if you're trying to really, make an objective decision on this game from a Packers fan perspective. It's that the Packers still have 2 games left with the Lions. They only have 1 left with the Vikings. So in that circumstance, it probably is better for the Vikings to take that first loss because the Packers don't have as many opportunities to tag more losses on the Vikings themselves, whereas they do have 2 games left with the Lions. I thought that was a worthwhile perspective.
It's tough to catch the front runner if they're not going to pull back a little bit, right?
Yeah, and from an injury, this game is really interesting also from an injury perspective because now it's possible Aaron Jones is going to be able to come back and play for Minnesota. That's still very much in question, though, and we saw when he exited the game in London against the Jets, the Vikings offense just kind of turtled up and couldn't do much without Aaron Jones. So they really, really want him back. And as we mentioned, then they made the trade for Cam Akers for depth at running back because they obviously have concerns there. And this will be the first game for the Lions without Aiden Hutchinson, who suffered that horrific broken leg, had to be rushed off for emergency surgery in Dallas. He's out for the rest of the season. And, that Lions defense now has to deal with not having not only the emotional leader and all that, but the guy who was, certainly already in the discussion for possibly NFL Defensive Player of the Year. And that's something that the Lions have to react to. One other game, obviously, that a lot of people will be watching on Sunday, the Super Bowl rematch. Kansas City Chiefs, San Francisco 49ers. And the Niners need to win in order to not be below 500 after 7 games, which is kind of hard to believe. Kansas City has taken on all comers. They haven't looked the prettiest in getting to 5-0, but Patrick Mahomes is proving that he's just a find a way to win guy with whatever the circumstances, whatever the stakes. This is a guy who finds a way. He's going to be working to find a way in San Francisco on late Sunday afternoon.
Reminds me a lot of like the 2015 Packers a little bit. I mean, obviously they didn't lose George. Well, actually they did. They lost Rashee Rice, but they're winning and they're just kind of like, okay, how long is this going to go for?
Right. How long? Yeah.
Is there going to be a hiccup there at some point?
Yeah.
San Francisco is in there, and I don't want to call it dire straits, but they're feeling it right now. I mean, when your kicker gets hurt, things are not going well for you right now. And
well, when your kicker gets hurt, and then your backup kicker gets hurt, and now you're possibly going to a third kicker, might end up being Anders Carlson. I mean, they signed him to the practice squad this week because of this injury situation at kicker. Yeah, and they're and at the same time they've been still trying to figure out where they're at offensively without Christian McCaffrey, who his absence now has been extended quite a while.
Yeah, interesting. He was questionable in that Week 1 game. But and then Jordan Mason's gotten banged up now too.
Yeah,
George Kittle has been fighting through some stuff. They're in a tough spot right now. Seeing where all that goes. May I throw in one more game for you?
Absolutely.
Let's talk about Russell Wilson potentially making his 2024 season debut after. In my opinion, I thought Justin Fields played really, really well.
I mean, what are the Steelers, 4-2?
Yeah, 4-2. Justin Fields, I think, has 1 interception this year.
You're 4-2, and you're actually thinking of changing quarterbacks here. I don't understand. I honestly don't understand it.
But we are getting Aaron Rodgers versus Russell Wilson. One is wearing a Jets uniform. One's wearing a Steelers uniform.
Yeah,
I mean,
who would have thunk it, right?
And also, I threw this out there on Twitter. I forget who it was originally. Maybe it was Perry Goldstein. That was the one that originally was talking about the Jets being in primetime again. Do you think the NFL made the Jets schedule and then after that just did the rest of the league the way that this has worked out? They've either been in primetime or they're in London.
Yeah.
That's just like the way of it this year.
Yeah. Well, and now it's like Now they have a new head coach. They have a new wide receiver they brought in via trade from the Raiders, and there's all kinds of stuff going on.
We got to go. There's no time left.
Yeah.
We got to leave.
We do have to go.
I'm so sick of double Monday Night Football already, too, by the way. We could save that for an off-season unscripted, potentially, if we need to kill some time at some point. I saw another doubleheader, or whatever you want to call these things, because they're not even double headers. They're like half-a-headers, where it's like there's some like overlap between the two games. I just give me one Monday night game, maybe one Sunday night game. If we got to do Thursday, we'll do Thursday. Sick of it.
That we're gonna do a Wes Hodkiewicz pet peeves off-season episode this coming.
I got a lot of problem with you people.
I got to start making some notes, but we do have to go. I will leave you with this, however. The home of the 2025 NFL Draft is right here in Green Bay, April 24 through April 26, 2025. Visit greenbay.com/draft25 for more information.
It's coming, Michael.
It is.
We're getting closer.
With that, we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team and everything from Sunday's big matchup with the Houston Texans at Lambeau Field. We will have it all for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.